companies.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm very proud to be here in this EME conference and presenting the I+Q dual-channel receiver for adaptive polarization. That is the small agenda we will have. We will talk in this introduction a few things: signal polarization on the EME path, how to fight against polarization changes. I will speak about the I+Q EME dual-channel receiver. The software quite works with that receiver. The new version coming just immediately after the conference. A new development, the I+Q single channel. And the last topic is not in the proceedings because my manufacturer in China just delivered the last PCBs one day before the conference. And I'm very proud we'll announce the I+Q wideband experimental board for the software design radio enthusiast. First of all, I want to extend my thank you to three persons: Ian White, who correct my presentation. I'm not natively English speaker. My mother tongue is Spanish. Living in Switzerland, try to speak German, but German dialect, no, that's a mess, really. And I want to extend also my thanks to Joe Taylor, because we have the chance to exchange notes before the conference, and he drive me to correct a lot of wrong statements in my presentation. And also I want to extend my thanks to Leif Afskrim, because without the collaboration of Leif, the I+Q will not be with us in this moment. Let's go talk about signal polarizations on the EME path. On lower bands, and the I+Q is concentrated and operating in lower bands, 50 megahertz, 144 and 432. In lower bands, linear polarized antennas are the world standard antennas. Are easy to build. Most of the stations using that. In 432, several stations are using also dishes, quite give the possibility to experiment more easy other kind of polarizations. But TXRX in the standardized polarization system don't guarantee a communication success via the moon. And that is mainly based on the fact that signal polarization change in the lower bands. And change mainly for three factors. This change in the polarization is making QSO sometimes very hard and sometimes almost impossible. And you hear people quite say, oh, propagation today was not good, or degradation is what too high. But in fact, all these elements associated with this change in the polarization introduce a heavy weight losses in our path, like we will see now. I have few slides on the presentation, just a reminder here. On the proceedings, I extended more talking about the architecture of the I+Q+, and on my homepage also it's much more information. The changes in the polarizations are the sum of mainly three components in the lower band. The first one is the spatial rotation, and we already listened all when he explained in 47 gigahertz that point. And that is the easy part. That is the predictable part. Today, almost all software for tracking can calculate this spatial rotation based on the fact and the difference in longitude between two stations. That is very, very often between stations, for example, located between Europe and America. The other two components in the reality are only one, and is our lovely Faraday rotation, the Murphy's of the lower band. This Faraday rotation happens twice. The times where our signal interact with the ionosphere, rich in plasma, in activated particles, excited by galactic noise, by sunstorms or whatever, produce a change in our polarization. And these two elements introduce, together with the spatial rotation, a very, very high losses, as we will see here. In a fixed polarized antenna, and in this rudimentary graphic, I'm assuming an horizontal antenna. When the depolarization is 90 degrees, the offset of 90 degrees introduces almost infinite attenuation. And we are in the situation quite QSOs are not possible. Conform this polarization change, the attenuation it's going to decrease until we arrive at a number of 3 dBs in 45. At 70 degrees offset, the attenuation is 9.32 dBs, quite is a very, very big amount of attenuation. At 45 degrees, let's say, is only 3 dBs. At 20 is 0.54 dBs. That means we are not able to control in a linear polarized antenna these changes in the polarization. Just say only one thing regarding Faraday rotation. Faraday rotation is inverse proportional to the frequency square. That means in higher bands, like in 432, the changes are very slow, but in 50 megahertz are a nightmare. I operated last year in Namibia, Victor 55 Echo Mike Echo, my first time 6-meter EME moon bounce, and the polarization changing in 20 seconds from a very strong signal to no signal on the passband. Well, how to fight against these changes in the polarization? One simple point will be rotate your antenna. And the only practical implementation I saw in the last years was Gold 3 Sugar Echo Kilo, iron white, create an array for 432 short jaggies just attached from the back, and he rotate the antenna to reach the properly polarization to compensate these 3 elements together. But this is impossible in 50 megahertz and in 144. That means we continue having that problem in the bands. We are investing a lot of times in preamps, in better amplifiers, in better radios, but people still working with linear polarized antennas, and means one element of the attenuation in our path calculation still untouchable. Nevertheless, one clever solution is very popular today. More and more stations having dual polarized antennas, 90 degrees out of phase, and they have a switch on the top of the antenna, and they can switch between vertical or horizontal. I know stations even, they have 2 receptors and 2 instances of software running, waterfalls, and they can select which receptor they are using. Means if the signal is coming more close to vertical, they use receptor A. If signal is coming more close to horizontal, they use receptor B. But this clever solution reduced the worst case scenario to minus 3 dB attenuation. As soon, if you're in horizontal, as soon the signal goes 45, that will be the lowest or the highest attenuation you could have. If the signal moves to vertical, you just switch the antenna, and then you are lower than 3 dB attenuation. But we can do all these kind of things in an automatic way without involving switching, coaxials, and more hardware will be more problematic to maintain. The use of 2 antennas in an orthogonal configuration, that means cross jaggies could be in this position plus or X position, and you are able to use an appropriate receptor, an appropriate software, you will be able to do an optimal weighted zoom in a vectorial way of these 2 signals, and you will be able to produce an antenna quite rotate linearly in any angle possible. To put this complicated statement in a simple word is, you are rotating your antenna, but inside your computer. Instead of jumping into complicated mechanical systems, you just rotate the antenna, and the software will go to the appropriate angle, doing this vectorial zoom of both RX channels. The first adaptive polarization system, and this is, I need to correct that statement because I say more than 10 years ago, but in the practice, it was designed 25 years ago by Leif Abskrin with his famous WSC converters and with his fantastic software, Linrad. In the beginning, Linrad was doing this adaptive polarization in a manually way. It means you need to rotate manually this electronic rotation, this vectorial zoom of the signals. But then later, he incorporated an automatic system. The I+Q is the consequence of these fantastic systems running 25 years, not so much well spread because no much units were produced. Everybody knows the WC converters was very, very nice and incredible piece of art receivers, but expensive, big ones, heavies, and sometimes difficult to manage through Lindra. That's why I decided to make, with my lab, a personal project called the I+Q project. Is a direct conversion receiver selected in 50, 144, or 432 megahertz. The other conversion is done in a traditional way via audio cards. Let's say 15 years ago, the only option was the Delta 44. Today, we have much more audio cards capable to have 4 input channels, like the EMU 1616, Maya 44, DMX 6 flyers, in the range of $120 to $700. The I+Q demodulator is based on a factory design I+Q demodulator from Linear Technology. Is the 5570, what is capable to produce an I+Q per output from 40 megahertz to 900 megahertz. I push this chip from 10 megahertz to 1.3 gigahertz with a little decrease in the performance just in the corners of the band. And the dynamic range and the input IP3 is good enough for the high bands we are using here. The I+Q radio included a dual bandpass filter before and after the preamplifier, reducing the size of the bandwidth you are presenting to the I+Q demodulator. And as a precondition, these 2 RX channels embedded inside are locked with the same local oscillator, preserving amplitude and phase as a condition for what is adaptive polarization. This is a block diagram of the radio. You have 2 RX boards exactly the same. You have 2 sets of antenna, 90 degrees offset. You have 2 pair of RX lines, 2 pair of preamps, not on the graphic, sorry. And both boards share the same local oscillator. Then you produce 4 audio channels, that means 2 I+Q pairs, and these I+Q pairs are introduced in a computer running Mac, Linrad, Windows, and probably other operative systems, I don't know exactly yet. But the most 3 popular systems are supporting these kinds of sampling and AD conversion. That are photos from the I+Q+. Unfortunately, I don't have one radio with me, not even for me, and I will say why. The I+Q+ is a very Spartan radio. You don't have mainly controls. In the front part, you have just an on-off button, and you have a power LED, and you have a TX, a mute LED, show you every time you TX, you need to introduce 12 volts in the radio to mute the I+Q+ and protect the I+Q+ properly for RF leakage coming from your amplifier. In the back part, you can identify perfectly the 2 RX channels. These are N connectors, and every channel have 2 I&Q outputs. That means you have totally 4 audio outputs going with audio cables to your PC. You have the DC plug, the RX mute, I already explained for what is, and then you have a USB connector for the BFO. The BFO in the local oscillator is located here. Is this board, is the most complex board. It's based on the SI570 chip. But as probably you don't know, this chip is very popular with the soft rock guys in the lower bands and medium bands. But I'm using a version called BBB. The version BBB has better thermal stability, and it's able to run up to 945 megahertz. You can identify the low-pass filter, you can identify the professional mini-circuit splitter, and the different SMA cables to interconnect the same local oscillator to both RX boards. Regarding the local oscillator, we have the possibility with this USB port to controlling the frequency even hertz by hertz, and that's allowed to us to move the center of our band pass to places where we don't have birdies or artifacts. That means we have some kind of agility on the local oscillator, giving to us a very good performance in terms of phase noise and stability. Not the same performance on a crystal oscillator, of course, and this is one of the big difference, for example, with the WC boxes, where the WC boxes are fully of crystals oscillator with an extremely low phase noise. But WC boxes are mainly instrument, it's a laboratory instrument, and that is a radio for EME. Regarding the solver for the I+Q+, well, existing only 2 software capable to do adaptive polarization, and these softwares are Lindred and MAP65. The other software, existing some software called Diversity, but more for the HV bands, but I was not able to really put this software running. That means I don't mention that software in my presentation. For the CW enthusiasts, de facto software is definitive Lindred with an extraordinary noise blanker and with an extraordinary filters. In case you are more interested in digital or you share your hobby also with the digital modes, the I+Q+ in the beginning was built to use Lindred as an input for MAP65. But just a few months ago, a few weeks ago, Joe Taylor was able to present a new version of MAP65 that is able to go direct to the audio card without using Lindred. All these extensions and capabilities introduced in the software permit the people to be not tied to only one option, and people can decide according to the interference level or personal preferences what kind of software can we use to present the data to MAP65. At the moment, existing 40 I+Q+s out of my laboratory, I think so. There are around 28 or 30 deployed. Someone's still waiting finish antennas or whatever. And the users report this direct integration to MAP65 running in a perfect way. Existing some specific situations, and I experiment that in HB9DRI, where the interference level, especially electrical level in the surroundings, forced to use a much more complicated noise blanker. And in that case, even if MAP65 improved dramatically the noise blanker, Lindred is still having an incredible performance to kill some specific kinds of interference in your bandpass. The I+Q+ revision A was ready to deliver to the first users 1 year ago. I want to produce only four units, and then I was confronted with extraordinary demand. I have very funny situations, things like that. For example, somebody deducted my email address was my PayPal account. And then, you know, in Switzerland, everything about banking is very well controlled. And then my banker called me and said, you know what? We're starting to look at a flow of exactly the same amount of money for 7 different countries. Can you please explain what's that? And then, and you know, 2 of these guys then they put their names, but they don't put any call sign. And it was very difficult to find who sent the money. That means after calling people and say, please don't send me money or whatever, happens another situation very similar. One I+Q+ user leaked my bank account. And the money started to go direct to my bank account. And it was around the amount of 10 or 15 radios around in less than a week. I say that because I was really running in pressure, in an extraordinary pressure, because I didn't have material. I didn't have all my lab well properly mounted. And the revision A was built by hand, 300 components, SMD, footprint 0805, soldered one by one. My mood was very bad. My wife loved me a lot. I decided to stop that situation and trying to do the things in a more professional way. And that is where Revision B comes. Revision B, based on the feedback of the users, improve some key points. I retired the revision A, and I'm planning to do the revision B in a more professional way. The internal preamplifier is completely redesigned, having better input IP3, just replacing the components from minor circuits for a better MMIC 50 ohms input-output, just on the market a few months ago. This will move automatically the saturation point to approximately 3 dB better with a delta 44 and around 7 dB better with the EMU 1660. The ENF was improved at 1 dB, better anti-alias filtering, because in the revision A, the I+Q demodulator was able to present 130 megahertz to the audio stage, and I didn't filter. That creates some overloads on the audio stage in some specific situation, and then I will decide to reduce the bandwidth to 1.5 megahertz to manage better out of band signals. One of the important improvements was the auto reset in the USB port. And I'm not guilty in this part. This is the nasty Windows manage the USB ports in a very, very bizarre way, and sometimes simple disconnect the I+Q Plus from the computer. And you was not able, re-scan or whatever. The only way to reattach the connection with the microprocessor was unplug the radio, replug the radio and the PC. And I think so that is annoying. That means I search what is the solution. I was in contact with the people who works on the firmware, but unfortunately that is something related with Windows. Doesn't happen in I+Q Plus's revision A running under Linux with Lindred and Linux integrated, but under Windows I was forced to introduce this auto reset. That means every time you switch on off the radio, we have an optocoupler on the radio quite auto reset the port without unplug physically the radio from the computer, and this is something really, really good. Well, the next improvement, it was, where is Sam? Sam is not here. Well, okay, I will say something. I say ROHS. Sam correct me and say rush. Let's go code rush. This readout of hazard substance was a personal goal in my compromise with the environment to produce a radio really ROHS or rush, as normally said here. And it was, in the beginning, I think it was a mistake, because after I replaced more or less 20% of the components for ROHS compliance, the radio never works again. Especially the oscillator. I have terrible, terrible problems, even working with very well-reputed Murata capacitors or inductors or whatever. And I need to invest a lot of time and some amount of money to buy samples, let's say this value, 3 different manufacturers, and 6 different kind of capacitors. And in 40% of the cases, it doesn't work until I found the properly component and reach the standard performance of my laboratory. But it was very hard, but it is. The I+Q Plus revision B, and any radio related with the I+Q Plus or any board related with the I+Q Plus is ROHS compliance. This version is now in production. As I said, I was not able to continue doing this one in this artisanal way, and I was forced to engage a professional company in California called Green Circuits. It's the company who is building the PCBs and assembling these 300 Oracle small devices with a machine. Set up the machine will take around 5 days, and produce the boards will take around 3 hours, when I need 22 hours per radio. That means I will reduce dramatically my free time invested on that part of my hobby, and I will put my friends more happy, because until now existing people already 1 year on the waiting list. And even some people upset because they say, hey, what you are doing means you promised that, but you don't deliver. I'm not able to deliver because they want too much radios. I hope I start to deliver in and send the radios to my waiting list end of September. That is at least my wish. Well, exists a new version is coming also, and it's called the single channel. And the single channel have a story linked with Victor Echo 1 Kilo Golf. I think so. More or less everybody knows Serge for his funny and famous emails about his problems with the dongle, with the Funkip dongle. He was not able, well, he in public said he is not a computer guy, and he has a lot of troubles to really produce put this dongle working. And he came to me and said, could you please send me a radio with only one channel? And I said, well, what I want to produce is a dual channel polarization, and you come and say you want to mutilate my radio and you want, I remove the board. Yes, please, okay, well, I will do for you. Unfortunately, this news was again spread, and a lot of people running other options, other people with just single polarized jaggies, running HB9DRI I+Q with transverter, or software with transverter, or radios with transverter, quite means big amount of hardware altogether, come to me and say, I want one. And I decide also to produce this single channel for those who don't want to jump in the challenge to install an orthogonal system in your antenna, an antenna orthogonal system, and they want to keep in horizontal or vertical polarization. The single channel is use exactly the same board. It's just one RX board less and one set of connector less. Use the same local oscillator, use the same RX board. Not even the SMA connectors are removed. That means later, if somebody wants to upgrade the single channel to a dual channel, just order the additional RX board, plug in, because even the holes will be present on the box. One important thing, and thinking in what kind of other uses you can apply to this single channel version of the I+Q+, is using as a pan adapter for the higher bands. Al will be very happy if he's able to use and have 90 kilohertz of bandwidth, or even more, depending on your audio card. You can go even to 192 kilohertz if you are using an EMU 1616, where Doppler make very, very difficult to find each other. We already saw the presentation of all how difficult it was in 47 gigahertz with all this calculation of my Doppler, your Doppler, double Doppler means, I think so, a pan adapter properly set up in your FI, and the FI could be selected in 50, 144, or 432, or even in any frequency between 40 megahertz to 900 megahertz. And that is my last slide. I'm in 28 minutes. That is not in the proceeds, sorry. Unfortunately, that board arrived just one day before the conference when the proceedings was already printed. And that is an I+Q wideband experimental board. This board, and I'm not sure if I have one with me here. Yes, I have one. This board is just this size. It's very small. It's maybe 6 by 6 centimeters. This board is exactly the same RX than the I+Q+ with all his performance embedded. The only thing you don't have is you don't have bandpass filters, you don't have internal preamplifier, and you don't have local oscillator. That means you have the input. This T100 is a very small SMD ceramic transformer to adapt the 50 ohms impedance to the input. This is the I+Q demodulator. It's a 4 by 4 millimeter, a nightmare chip to solder manually. And then you have another SMA input. This is your local oscillator. The only precondition for that board, and also for the I+Q+, is the local oscillator need to be exactly 2 times your frequency. You want 144, the local oscillator need to be 288. You want 50 megahertz, the local oscillator need to be 100, and 432 is the challenge because the local oscillator need to be the double. Okay, that board included the audio stage, included all the voltage regulators, and it will be fully populated. And it's mainly done in a way I will call, let's say, to try to keep the interest in software-defined radio technology, to try to keep the interest in Linrad will match perfectly with that kind of board. I don't have finally yet the price, but will be very cheap. It will be very cheap, I promise that. It will be available, I think so, in October. Well, that is mainly my presentation. Extended information about the architecture of the IQ+. That means how I manage the audio, how I distribute the noise. Quite was the difficult part for me to understand when Leif explained me. I already forgot how many times I fight with Leif because he was telling me or explained me to do something and I didn't understand, but he encouraged me to don't stop the project. I was very close to stop because I never had experience to building software-defined radios, and even I need to buy new instruments, more sophisticated spectral analyzers, etc., etc. Leif encouraged me to do that, and he explained me how to distribute the noise in the different stages. It was the key and the point to obtain a properly radio for EME. I have a few. I just put what guys coming in my mind. I don't have the complete list with me. That are almost the guys quite at least order and have and receive an IQ+. Someone's even one order 2 in this list, other order 3, and one order 4 radios. And I calculate from the 40 radios delivery are more or less 28 already active. This was a personal project. I never intended this project to win money. I'm not making money, I'm just covering roughly my minimal cost. Are more headaches I have, especially when I need to deal with export rules in the United States. You know, buying components to the United States means most of the components. I am not working with eBay and buying cheap Chinese components because this is only troubles. Means the radio is fully of, for example, semiconductors are coming from linear technologies and mini circuits. And when I order a big amount of these devices, I need to go to the American embassy in Bern, present myself, be screened by the American authorities, and said, "Are you sure you will not trespass this technology to a long list, starting with Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, etc., etc. Are you sure you will not build an atomic bomb? No, yes. Can you sign this one? Are you know the consequences if we detect one of your products?" And then I need to make some statements like, "Hey, but if somebody buy and then smuggling the device to another one of these countries," things like that. Means it's not only take a board and solder components, dealing with all the export paper. It was also headed with insurance, because the IQ+, thanks God, allowed today at least 30 or 40 new people are far away from Faraday rotation. These people Faraday rotation is old story for that people. In just 1 year ago, the only option you have is build yourself with soft rocks or with transverters, or, well, stay in horizontal polarization. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. And